The cursed Unexplained family must burn their home every decade. What would possess a family to set their own home ablaze every 10 years, like clockwork? Not madness. Not grief. Not the kind of desperation that makes people do things they later regret in bright morning light. What drives the Unexplained family to strike the match is something far older, far quieter, and far more patient than any of those things. It is a curse that does not chase. It does not scream. It simply waits, inside the walls, inside the wood, inside the particular quality of silence that fills a house after everyone has gone to sleep, and it grows. They have been doing this for 140 years. 5 generations. 6 houses built on the same stone foundation in the same stretch of countryside, each one a little different in shape and character, each one loved completely and surrendered completely, every single decade, without exception. The story begins, as so many stories of this kind begin, with a man who did not ask the right questions. His name was Edvard Unexplained. He was a timber merchant in the late 1800s, the kind of man who built his fortune with his hands and his home with his pride, and who treated the land the way men of that era often did, as something to be used rather than understood. When he found the black pine forest on the edge of the valley, trees so dense the canopy blocked daylight entirely at noon, trees whose bark had a scorched, charcoal texture that no fire had ever produced, he did what a timber merchant does. He measured. He calculated. He hired men to cut. The local villagers refused to work in that forest. They refused to explain why in any satisfying way. They spoke in fragments, old words, hand gestures, a particular way of not meeting his eyes when the subject came up. Edvard took this as superstition. He hired men from 2 counties over who had no history with the valley, no inherited knowledge of what grew in it, and he built his estate from that black pine. Floors, beams, walls, the grand staircase that his wife said made the whole house feel like a spine. They moved in during the autumn of 1884. It was, by every account in the family archive, a beautiful house. Marta Unexplained, Edvard's wife, a woman of remarkable clarity and careful observation, wrote letters to her sister describing it in terms of genuine warmth. The way the morning light came through the eastern windows. The smell of the wood, which was unusual, not the sweet sawdust smell of fresh pine, but something earthier, older, like soil after deep rain. She found it comforting, at first. The first letter that concerns us is dated 3 years later, the winter of 1887. Marta wrote to her sister, "I have found handprints in the upstairs hall. They are burned into the plaster. Not charred, not darkened by soot, but burned the way a brand burns, pressed, deliberate, as though something very hot held its hand flat against the wall and left an impression. I have asked the servants. No one will look at the wall when I point to them. Edvard says the house is settling." The house was not settling. Over the following months, the letters changed. Marta described her children, 3 of them, ages 4 through 11, refusing to play in certain rooms without explanation. She described waking in the middle of the night to a sound she struggled to name, finally settling on the phrase "the house breathing." She described shadows in the hallway that did not correspond to any object or person she could locate. She described, in one letter that her sister reportedly burned after reading, something she had seen through the kitchen window, the shape of a man standing at the edge of the tree-line in the dark, entirely still, for hours, that turned out, when Edvard investigated with a lantern, to be nothing at all. No footprints. No disturbance in the frost. By year 9 of living in the house, Marta would not sleep in any room that shared a wall with the exterior of the building. Edvard, to his credit, finally listened. What he heard, in the walls, in the floors, in the way the grand staircase groaned at 3 in the morning when no one was on it, convinced him of something he could not have articulated and would never attempt to write down. He gathered his family, he gathered what they could carry, and in the spring of 1894, he burned his estate to the foundation. He rebuilt it that same year. Different layout, different room arrangement, same stone foundation, same plot of land, but every beam, every floorboard, every wall, sourced from different wood entirely. He was specific about this in the single document he left regarding the event, a 3-paragraph note that now lives in a wooden box the family carries from house to house. Do not use the black pine. Do not use anything from the valley forest. And do not wait longer than 10 years. I waited 9 and nearly lost them all. 10 years is the limit. It may be less. I believe 10 is generous. He was right. The new house was quiet,
clean.
The children played in every room. Marta slept against exterior walls again. The shadows were just shadows. For 10 years. The Aristone family has had a great deal of time to develop their theories about what the curse is, precisely, and none of them are fully satisfying, which is perhaps the most honest thing about them. The most detailed attempt at explanation came from the third-generation matriarch, Lena Aristone, who spent much of her adult life in the early 20th century trying to approach the family situation with something resembling scientific rigor. She was not a scientist. She was a seamstress and an amateur naturalist, but she was systematic, and the document she produced in 1921, which the family calls the Shadow Map, remains the closest anyone has come to a working theory. Lena's central argument was that the original black pine had never fully died. Not in the conventional sense. She believed that wood carries a kind of memory, a cellular residue of the conditions of its origin, and that the forest Edvard had harvested was a place so thoroughly removed from ordinary natural processes that the wood it produced carried something beyond memory. It carried presence, a slow, patient, non-conscious presence that required only one thing to activate: love. This is the part of Lena's theory that the family finds most difficult to discuss with outsiders because it sounds, at first hearing, almost sentimental. But Lena was precise about what she meant. The presence in the wood, she argued, does not respond to people living in a house. It responds to people making a house into a home. The attachment, the accumulated weight of daily life pressed against the walls, children's drawings, the smell of meals, arguments and reconciliations, the specific creak of a floorboard learned so thoroughly it becomes navigation. All of it feeds something in the wood. All of it, slowly, over years, wakes it up. The handprints in Marta's hall appeared in year 3. This is consistent, the family has found, across generations. The first 2 years in a new house are clean. Year 3, something begins. Year 7, it becomes difficult to ignore. Year 9, the family stops using certain rooms entirely. By year 10, the walls breathe. What breathes in the walls, what it wants, whether it wants anything in the way that implies consciousness. No Aristone has ever been willing to speculate directly. What they know is behavioral. It grows stronger the longer it is left undisturbed. It does not follow them when they leave. And it does not survive fire. One family member tried to test this boundary. His name was Pitre, a younger son in the 1950s generation, a skeptic by temperament, who found the whole ritual humiliating and refused to participate. He was 23 years old when he packed his things independently of the family process, drove 3 counties away, and built himself a life in a small city apartment with no wooden walls and no black pine ancestry that anyone could trace. For 7 years, Pitre wrote regularly. His letters were normal, affectionate, even, despite the circumstances of his leaving. He visited twice. The family described him as himself, brisk, funny, allergic to sentiment. Then the letters became strange. Small things at first. A new preoccupation with the corners of rooms. Descriptions of sounds in his building that his neighbors did not report. A growing reluctance to be in his apartment after dark. Then the letters stopped. The family found him in 1961. He was living, technically. He was functional, technically. He would not tell them what had happened in the apartment, and they did not press him, because the Aristones have a long tradition of not pressing. He came home. He participated in the 1963 burning, stood with the family on the lawn, watched the house go, bowed his head at the end. And he burned with them every decade until he died in his 80s, in a rented room, 18 months into a rebuild, in the careful temporary life the family lives between houses. He never again tried to leave the land. The land, it seems, is part of it. The stone foundation, the specific geography of the hill. The family has discussed, in every generation, the possibility of simply never building again, of selling the land, moving entirely, starting fresh somewhere with no history. And in every generation, they have arrived at the same conclusion, articulated most clearly by Lena in her shadow map. The curse doesn't chase us. It waits. It lives in whatever walls we choose to call home, because the walls we call home are the ones we love. Running would just teach it new addresses. They have chosen instead to manage it. The preparation for a burning begins, quietly, in the 8th year of the decade. Not with action. The house is not emptied or prepared in any visible way in year 8. What happens in year 8 is internal. The family begins gradually and without explicit discussion, the process of detachment. It is something like grief, but backwards, grief that anticipates rather than follows. They become slightly more careful about what they bring into the house. Slightly less inclined to hang new things on the walls. Slightly more likely to sit outside on summer evenings rather than inside. By year 9, the process becomes practical. The family holds what they call an accounting, a room-by-room assessment of every object in the house, conducted by the adults together, governed by rules passed down verbally through every generation. Objects that have been in contact with the walls for more than 2 years are considered compromised. Not dangerous, exactly, but carrying something they cannot afford to carry into a new house, the way a sponge carries water, not the water itself but the fact of it, the residue. These objects stay. Large furniture pressed against walls for years. Mounted frames, their backs touching plaster. Curtain hardware, built-in shelves and everything on them. The family takes them down gently, sets them in the center of rooms, and leaves them there, an offering to the fire, and perhaps to whatever waits in the wood for the fire to come. Objects deemed safe are tagged with small white ribbons and moved to the lawn over the course of several weeks. The process is unhurried, meticulous. The family has learned, over generations, that rushing this stage makes the final night harder. Some objects undergo what the family calls the cleansing line, a controlled burn in the yard, brief and supervised, designed not to destroy but to purify. A chair that has been in the house for 4 years but holds particular sentimental value. A wooden toy that a child refuses to leave behind. These objects are held at the edge of a small fire, close enough that they scorch, close enough that the flame tests them. If they survive intact, blackened but whole, they are deemed clean. If they burn completely, the family accepts it. It was too far gone to save. The children of the household always carry these decisions harder than anyone admits. To a child, the burning is not a ritual. It is the most dramatic fact of their existence, the organizing event of their childhood, the thing that makes their family both interesting and impossible to explain to friends. The Aristotle children develop, universally across generations, a particular relationship with impermanence. They do not collect things the way other children do. They are generous with their possessions in a way that sometimes reads as indifference, but is actually something more sophisticated, a practice understanding that objects are temporary and love is the only portable currency. On the night of the burning itself, the children are always last to leave the house. This is one of the oldest rules, and no one in 6 generations has been able to explain it adequately. The youngest children are escorted through every room by an older sibling or cousin. The eldest child walks alone. Every room, every corner, in silence. The family describes this as a goodbye, and it is, but they also describe it haltingly as something else. A witnessing. Someone to look directly at what has grown in the walls over the decade, to meet it with clear eyes, and to say, without words, "We see you. And we're leaving." No child who has taken that walk has ever reported what they saw. On the night itself, there is no panic. This surprises everyone who witnesses it from the outside for the first time. There is something almost liturgical about the Aristotle burning, not religious, exactly, but possessed of the same quality as certain religious ceremonies, the sense of a community in practiced, deliberate motion, each person knowing their role, each action weighted with accumulated meaning. People who have observed it describe feeling, unexpectedly moved, not by sadness, but by something harder to name. The family is not performing grief. They are performing competence. They have done this before. They will do it again. They know how. The house is lit on every floor, every lamp burning at full, so that on the night of the burning these state blazes from inside before a single torch is raised. The family gathers at exactly 40 feet from the front door. This distance is specified in Edvard's note and has never been changed. There is a practical reason, the heat, and possibly other reasons the family prefers not to examine. The eldest living family member approaches the house alone. They walk through every room, the same path the children walked, but more slowly. They are not saying goodbye to the rooms. They are performing a final reckoning, a last witness. When they emerge, they close the front door behind them with quiet deliberateness, the way you close the door to a room where someone is sleeping. They pick up the torch, a simple, heavy-handled thing, lit from a lantern the family has carried since 1894, repaired and rewrapped in every generation, the oldest continuously used object in the Aristhone inventory. And they light it. The fire begins at the base of the door and moves the way fire always moves, upward, spreading, pragmatic about its path. For most of the burn, it behaves exactly as anyone would expect. The wood catches. The structure heats. The windows blow outward in sequence. The family watches without speaking. Then, in the final minutes before the structure fails entirely, the flames change. Every generation describes it the same way. The fire goes dark, not black, not the absence of light, but a deep, bruised color that sits outside the normal palette of combustion, something between violet and the last shade before darkness. The family has never photographed this successfully, which may be technical limitation or maybe something else. It lasts for less than a minute. Then the roof collapses, and the fire returns to ordinary orange, and the house becomes a foundation again. No one has ever explained the color. No one tries anymore. The family stands until every ember dies. This takes, on average, 3 hours. They do not leave early. They do not speak above a whisper. Some pray. Some do not. Some simply stand and watch, the way you watch the end of something that mattered, because looking away would be a different kind of loss. At dawn, they drive away. Before the embers are cold, sometimes before the fire is fully out, the blueprints for the next house are already drawn. This is perhaps the detail that most perfectly captures what the Aristhone curse has made of the Aristhone family. The new plans are always completed in the weeks before the burning. They are specific, detailed, already approved, a home that is new in every dimension and yet always situated on the same foundation, the same land, the same hill that Edvard Aristhone cleared 140 years ago. The new house takes 18 months to build. In the meantime, the family rents. They live lightly, in temporary spaces, treating nothing as permanent, carrying their white ribbon heirlooms and their cleansed toys and their one family lantern into apartments and rental houses that they will never love the way they love their own walls. They do not hang pictures in rented rooms. They do not put down rugs. They do not let themselves mistake a borrowed ceiling for a home. They save that love. They accumulate it deliberately, with full awareness, over those 18 months, and they carry it into the new house when it rises. They press it into fresh walls that have not yet learned to hold anything. They fill it with sound and argument and cooking smells and children measuring themselves in door frames with pencils, the marks going up an inch at a time, the initials and years accumulating, knowing, fully and without illusion, that those marks will burn in 10 years, and making them anyway, because the making is the point. This is what the Aristhone family has learned from 140 years of mandatory impermanence, that love is not diminished by a known ending, that a house you will lose in a decade can be loved as completely as a house you believe you will keep forever, more completely, perhaps, because you have been cured of the lie that forever is available to you. The rest of us build walls and fill them, and tell ourselves the walls will last. We accumulate. We hold on. We press our grief into the corners and let it stay there, in the wood, in the plaster, and we call that stability. The Aristhones burn it out and begin again. Every decade. Every time. Somewhere in a kitchen drawer in the current Aristhone house, a house that is now 6 years into its decade, that has 3 children measuring themselves in door frames and 2 adults who have already begun, quietly and without discussion, the first stages of letting go, there is a box of matches. The family does not hide it. They are not afraid of it. They keep it close. The Erasthone estate has been rebuilt 5 times on the same foundation. The 6th iteration will be completed in 4 years.